Hi there, welcome to this YouTube video. Again, a very important topic. I think one of the most important topics I would say that we have covered so far, web security and Owasp vulnerabilities, top 10. We will be discussing in this video part 2. This will be the part 2. Part 1, Akshay has already covered in the previous video. So please go back if you have not watched the part 1. It will make more sense for you if you will watch part 1 then part 2. This is the part 2, guys. So make sure that you take the complete knowledge out of these videos, because if you are a fresher, maybe for the first time these videos will not make much sense. So try to understand again and again, and try to rewind and watch these videos again and again. And without any further ado, I have subject matter expert having more than a decade of experience in information security domain and founder of a company called Anzen Technologies. Akshay Dixit is here with me. Akshay, welcome on board.
Thanks, Love. Thanks for having me. So, in our previous session, we were discussing about web security and Owasp series. We had discussed about the components of web architecture and the different types of inputs and attacks that are out there. Um, and then we continued to move on to the OWASP top 10 series. We touched base on what OWASP is all about, what the top 10 is all about, and we were in the process of covering the top 10. I believe we had covered the three of them, which is injection, broken authentication, and sensitive data exposure.
Right, Akshay. Absolutely.
Right, and we were on moving forward. So couple of disclaimers and couple of things that I would like to continue in the same what I said in yesterday's session itself. So the first is that this is a basic introduction. So for people who are already experienced in application security, this might not be the one for you. We are obviously going to dive deep, but for us to create an advanced content, we first need to lay the grounds and not taking any assumptions, because on Love's channel, what we try to do is we try to demystify topics at a very basic level, taking basic examples, and we build over that. So in the same spirit, we're going on with this. So it's not going to cover any advanced topics, it's not going to have any practicals per se. It's just to introduce people to the concept of web security and what OWASP is all about. Because when you enter into the world of web security, even if you're an experienced professional in some other subdomain of information security, and now you're either a part of or you're moving completely into application security, you need to understand these concepts. Second thing is, folks, little bit of cold and cough I have, so I may be taking pauses and breaks. Just bear with me with that. I'll try to
Sure,
deliver
Akshay.
everything.
Sure. Take your time,
But
Akshay. Yeah, it's
yeah,
fine. It's fine. Absolutely.
okay, cool. So in the same spirit, let's move on to the third one, or the fourth one, I guess, which is XML, external entities, or XXE. This is one of, it has over time, it has become one of the common types of attacks. It has a different range of the ways in which this can be exploited. A little twisted and a little complicated to understand, so I'll try to explain this in a very basic fashion. So first, to understand XXE, we need to understand what XML is. So let's first touch base, and I'll give a very brief introduction on what XML is. I guess a lot of people already know what XML is, and people who don't know might have heard about it somewhere. So XML basically stands for extensible markup language, right? And not going with the whole definition of it, it's basically a way of representation of data. So for different platforms, different applications, different endpoints communicate with each other in different formats. So when we're talking about an HTTP or an HTTPS based communication, a lot of different formats are there in which communication happens. You could call it SOAP, JSON, and XML is one of the ways of it, right? The CSV is also one of the formats. So when I say XML, basically what I'm saying is that it's a representative format. It defines a set of rules, a set of ways in which you can how should I say it, arrange your data, and you can send that data from one end to the other end and back, right? So it's basically a key value pair in which there's a specific format and a standard in which it is defined, which is called as XML 1.0 specification. So for people who want to understand deeper into how an XML document looks like, how an XML data is represented, you might want to search on the XML 1.0 specification. That will tell you exactly how it is. But to give you a basic idea, it's basically a key value pair in which it is defined. And this is what XML is all about. So typically how a communication would happen is you have a front end or a browser, as we discussed in the previous session, and as I enter data, this client will represent the data in a certain format, in an XML format, in the HTTP or HTTPS body, and it will send it to the middleware or the web application, and the web application will then process this data. It will have, so you have an XML input that is going in. The application will have an XML parser because it needs to understand, it needs to be able to decode, let's say, and let's not call it encoding, or let's call it encoding, let's call it arranging in a certain in an XML format. And then you will have an XML processor or an XML parser at the server end, which will then take the different types of data, and then it will use that data to perform certain processes or perform certain actions. This is a typical communication. Now, why they are using XML as a format? Because it's easy to understand. It's a generic format, so even different types of clients, different types of communications can happen through XML. So having a generic model or a generic data representation is usually feasible when the server is interacting with a lot of clients, or you have a scalability in mind when you're trying to in future scale your application. So if the developer uses their own proprietary format for data communication, it becomes a little complicated, specifically as applications keep growing, developers keep changing. So usually we try to keep as general standards as possible when it's talking about communication. So XML is well known. It's an industry standard. It's an international standard. Almost all browsers or applications can have the capability of understanding XML as a markup language, and putting in an XML processor or a parser is not that big of a problem. Almost all programming platforms support this.
Akshay, is this like HTML, XML, like it's a language, right?
Yeah, so Luv, HTML is basically how you are representing thing on your browser, right? So HTML is
Right.
obviously it's also a markup language. XML is also a markup language. HTML is supposed to represent data on the front end. XML
Yes.
is used to exchange data. It's the same thing. HTML also
Okay.
uses tags. XML will
Right.
also use tag.
Right.
HTML. So yes, in the same way, the purpose is a little different. HTML is more for a visual appearance, and XML is more for data exchange, right?
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So now we talked about XML. Now let's break this word down. We talked about XML external entities, XXE. So now we know what XML is. Now let's talk about external entities. Before talking about external entities, let's focus on the word entity. So if you guys, if you get a time, I would really encourage you to go through the XML 1.0 specification. What you will find out is that XML world, the world of XML data representation, defines something called as an entity. So entity, to be explained in a very simple way, is basically a storage unit. It's a way of storing data, and that storage unit, that entity, will basically contain some value. It's a key value pair. It has an entity name. It will have a certain entity value, and that will be used to access the application resources or do some action on the resources that are present in the application. This is a basic use of an entity. Now XML world has something which they called as a document type declaration, or a DTD. Why I'm explaining these basic terms is when you go through it, you will face these terms, and I don't want you guys to get confused. So basically what you're doing in a DTD, in an XML world, a DTD is basically the way the metadata, or the place where you're defining your different attributes, different variables, different values. And in the DTD is where you are basically defining your entities.
Akshay, a lot of people ask me this question regarding metadata. What is a metadata? Just in a basic term.
Yeah, so love, metadata is basically you have, so essentially what you're trying to say, uh, two entities or 2 points are trying to exchange some type of data. Now,
Right.
in different ways, they will be exchanging different data.
Right.
So, if I give you a data directly, love, without telling you which type of a data it is, then you will struggle understanding what this data means and how should I make sense
Process
of
it.
the data.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So when I say, so along with the data, I give a metadata, which is basically
Ah.
information about the data.
So can
So
I say
this,
it's type of a tag identifier that I am putting on top
yes,
of the data? Okay. Okay.
yes. So
Okay.
basically,
Okay.
metadata is telling you the data that is going to come after me, what it is all about.
Ah, got it
So
now.
it
Got it.
will give all the necessary definitions, all the necessary keywords, all the
Great.
values that you need to know about, right?
Right. Got it. Got it.
Right. So, similar fashion, the DTD, the document type declaration, will tell you what types of entities have been defined. Now, according to XML 1.0 specification, you can have different types of entities, parsed, unparsed. I'm not going to talk about that. Let me just establish 2 types of entities, which is an internal entity and external entity. So internal entity at a very basic level is something that is already known and understood by XML. So these are known variables that can be understood by an XML processor. External entity is something that is from an outside that you define, like dynamically it's defined, and the other party, the external party that is either giving the data or taking the data, or is involved in a communication and XML based data exchange with the application, will has the capability of defining external entities,
What
right?
is the difference between them then, Akshay?
So internal entity would typically, love, would be the processor knows these entities. He knows the
Ah,
definition of
so
them.
is well aware, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Okay.
external is a custom defined entity that me as a client can define and then share with the processor. Maybe
Ah,
for
got it.
some processing or for some activity.
Right. Right.
Right.
Which is
Now,
not already the part of the system, right? Ah.
yes,
Okay.
we can say that in a very
Okay.
basic sense.
Right.
Right
Right.
now, the challenge that comes over here, love, is that if an application by default is trusting all the data that is coming from my XML, from the XML data from the client, and I
Hmm.
am trusting the fact that the external entities defined in that DTD of XML that is coming inside me is trusted, and I'm
Ah.
not validating it, and I am not validating it before processing and putting it as a part of my system or in the part of my further processing.
Right.
That is
Right.
where this vulnerability comes in.
Ah, because you're trusting that one.
Yes. So
Ah,
instead of
got it.
giving a normal input in the external defined entity, I will put in something malicious.
Right.
The web server will trust it, will not validate it, and will use that for further action, and that could cause the server to do some action which originally it did not intend to do, and fulfills the purpose of the attacker.
Ah, got it now. Great.
Right? So, for example, when you look at a specific XML format, you are basically, it has an how should I call it? It has a curly bracket, or like an a greater than sign question XML version, blah blah. Then it has a doc type element, and you define basically an entity using a greater than sign, exclamation point, and entity, and then you start defining your external entity.
Okay.
So what I could do as an attacker, I could define a system type of external entity, and if I know, if I understand, if you remember, love, in our last discussion, we said different requests I will send, and basis
Yes.
of the response, I will take an educated guess
Yes.
on what type of processing is happening, and if I'm
Right.
able to understand the operating system behind it, let's say I know that it is a Linux system, or I
Right.
know that it is a Windows system, or I
Right.
know what is the file structure. If I understand it's
Depending
an
upon the
Apache,
responses. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yes. If I
Right.
know it's an Apache, if I know it's an IIS, then I can target specific type of a command. I can target specific type of a file, and what I can do is I can define my string, that system variable I can define as either file colon triple slash, and then I can say etc slash passwd. And
Ah,
basically it will not parse, it will not validate that input, it will process it, and in response to what it was supposed to do, it might leak the password file back to the client. That's
I
just
got it
one
now.
example of it.
Yeah, I got it now. Great, great. I got it
in,
now.
it could also be an execution in which I could say that, go ahead and Windows system calc calculator file, or cmd make new account. So then it goes ahead and it processes it on the operating system and it executes that. So so
Ah,
that could lead to a remote code execution. I am sitting
right.
here, I am sending as a part of that external entity a command. You're not processing the command, and you're essentially just processing it, and that causes execution of some kind of a code, and I am able to achieve it. But the application is not supposed to run command on an unauthorized command on the operating system itself, but in
Hmm.
fact it does.
Right.
So
Just to process that data, right? Yeah.
exactly, and that's why I said that, the consequences can be something small to something really large, depending on the kind of operation the application is doing, or the interaction the application is doing within itself
Right.
and with the operating system, underlying operating system, right?
Right. Right.
So those are the implications of it.
Akshay,
uh,
can we also give an IP address to an external location as well in that particular string as well?
we can reveal, we can come, if it's vulnerable to a remote code execution, we can get the internal IP information, we can get the networking table out of it,
Wow.
we can do a remote file inclusion, a local file inclusion. Lot of things can happen, Love. Now,
So it's an open platform for the attacker. Yeah.
yes, the
Yeah.
idea is, Love, see, understand this. What are you going to do with the XML input that is coming?
Right. Right.
Are you displaying it back? If you're displaying it back, data leakage is something I will try to target. What
Right.
if the XML is being used for doing some processing? Then
Right.
code execution I might try to do. So that is now on an attacker to kind of find out what is happening with my XML data that is being exchanged between me and the server.
Right. Got
And
it.
that is why I keep stressing on the fact that even for pen testing, or even from an attack perspective, it's about understanding what is happening
Right.
and then crafting your attack accordingly.
Right. How does
Yeah,
a mitigation happen in this case? Like, how can the companies protect them? Because this is kind of very serious. It looks like. Yeah.
yeah. So the very two basic things, Love. First, understand first that you disable external entities input from untrusted sources.
Okay.
That's it. So you disable external entities
Kind
if
of
you
a
don't want
firewall
it.
that you have put in there. Yeah.
Yes,
Absolutely. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
are just like nipping the problem in the bud. I will
Right.
disable external entities altogether. No
Yeah.
point of having any kind
No
of an
point
attack,
checking them. Right. Right. Right.
right? That is one.
Right.
But should you require, should your application has a business requirement, and somehow maybe you're making API calls, maybe you're interacting with somebody with some other application, there is some kind of an integration that you're supporting which does require, in that case you might go for input validation, validating the fields inside the external entity variable that you are getting before processing it.
Hmm.
You can
Or
do
content filtering.
exactly content
Ah,
filtering. You can do
right.
a whitelisting. You can only say,
Right.
I allow only these characters, anything else do not allow.
Right.
Give,
Got it.
give them an error. There was an error processing. Please resend the request again.
Yeah, but do not process that. Right.
Do not
Absolutely.
process that, right?
Got it. Got it.
Then other ways are that, okay, so one of the points where this happens is where you're allowing them to upload some kind of a file,
Ah,
right? You're
right.
allowing them to upload a file which has an XML format. So check the content, not just at client level, also at server level, before you are processing or making that file part of your system,
Okay. Okay.
right? So always validation, input validation is the key.
Right.
Disabling external entities, whitelisting, putting a web application firewall, all of those are compensatory controls or additional controls or supplementary controls, as you
Mitigation
can say,
strategy. Yeah. Right. Right.
right?
Great.
So yeah, this is pretty much it from an XXE, and it's pretty simple to conduct an XXE attack. That is
Okay.
the challenge with this attack, or the challenge with this
Script kiddies can
vulnerability.
do this.
uh, not maybe not script. So script
Okay.
kiddies can find out if a application is vulnerable to XXE,
They can't go
but
to that level. Right. Right.
exploitation to the fullest is not that easy,
Now I got your point. So
right? So I can
they'll know the gate is open. Yeah.
yes, but then
Yeah.
how to get entry and how to get the maximum out of this vulnerability is something that requires a little bit of
Professional
more
knowledge. Yeah. Yeah.
practice. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly.
Right. 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 Got
Yeah.
it. Got it. Great,
So this
Akshay.
is pretty much it about. I hope this is clear because this is a very confusing topic.
You nailed it,
XML.
man. You nailed it. A guy
Yeah,
like me is able to understand. You nailed it. I'm just kidding. Go for it. Yeah.
yeah. So we talked about this. So injection, broken authentication, sensitive data exposure, XML, external entities. Now we're talking about broken access control. So basically, to talk about broken access control, first we need to understand what access control is, and we already know, right? So from an application perspective, now let's talk about access control from an application perspective. Very simply put, the application has different, see, ultimately love, a web application is made of pages, it's made of modules, that's it. So it will have 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 number of modules. These modules will have different types of pages. There will be a flow between modules. Certain people will be allowed access to a certain modules, and certain people will not be allowed access to certain modules. Certain, I would want certain type of people to access some pages and certain type of people not to access some pages. And how do I do it? Through access control. So basically, it's the same concept anywhere. And in network, we are talking about different types of network resources, and in application, we are saying different, limiting the access of different modules and different pages in the context of the web application for different types of users is basically an access control, right? And broken access control is basically saying that my access control mechanism is insufficient or is not capable enough or is not improper, is improper, right? So what this essentially translates to in the application world, application security world, is basically when I am saying that let's say I have made an application, right? I have already there is an application, but I have not restricted access to different modules. For example, quite of, and it's still prevalent, is you're browsing through an application and you're a normal user, and suddenly you go to a module and you see the hosting panel login page.
The C panel.
The
Yeah.
C panel, yes, exactly,
Right.
the C panel.
Right. Right.
So why am I as a regular user being able to see the cPanel page? I should not. Sometimes you the same server, it's a web server, right? And I'm trying to access it, and I try to telnet or to the server via, or I try to access the FTP, and I get access to the FTP module as well. I get access to the SFTP module. I get access to the telnet. I get access to the SSH. So it's not to say that I am actually exploiting something immediately, but it is to say that such pages should not be accessible to me at all in the first place,
Right. Right.
because then
Absolutely.
they open the gates to further attacks,
Yes.
right? So for example, a lot of applications, they will expose any and every type of, so you basically have an xyz.com and you give xyz.com/admin and you get access to the admin portal. Now a lot of cases, love, where it happens is they will not put a lockout over there. Now I have an access to an admin page and I can try and each and everything. So now what is the most logical thing I will do? Try to conduct a brute force attack. And God forbid, if I am successful in doing so, then that's like a compromise and I'm logged in into the admin panel and then I can do anything. So understand from a very basic, just by exposing and not implementing correct access control, you're basically able to do this. And the direct reason, the direct result of of a broken access control is privilege escalation. So
Right.
all
Right.
types of attacks that I can conduct that can cause me either to gain my privilege or to gain the privilege of another person I explained the vertical, the horizontal, and the vertical privilege escalation in the last session. This is the cause of a broken access control, right? So the different types of so some business logic specific attacks can also be categorized under broken access control. So one thing that people should understand is that broken, see, there are two ways of understanding a vulnerability. It's a flaw. It could be a direct technical flaw like a SQL injection, or it could be a category called as a broken access control. And
Right,
Owasp
right.
does not differentiate between the two in its top 10 list. That is a point where a lot of people get confused. That one is talking about a direct vulnerability and another seems like a category, right? But Owasp, and that's just my opinion, that it's just basically a category. And so a lot of times, Love, when we have discussions with our client, when we find a vulnerability, we usually like to tag it with an Owasp category so that have a better way of understanding in which category does it lie. So
So
it
for
may
from
not,
an Akshay, from an individual standpoint, like for all the people who are watching this video for the first time and are confused to the same question that you just mentioned, how is what kind of a strategy they should use in order to categorize this?
yeah, so you need to understand for anybody and everybody. See, and again,
Small tips. Yeah,
yeah, so I want to give a disclaimer here, Love, because
yeah.
people are there is a whole, what I'm going to say might be taken in a different context, so I would like to give a
But this is
disclaimer
your
beforehand.
own opinion, right? So you can go for it.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
which is
absolutely.
basically to say that OWASP is a guideline, is like a
Ah,
standard that should be referred to. It should not be
right.
your baseline of doing an assessment. So it's
Ah,
not
which
like
a
I
lot of
am,
people may be doing. Absolutely.
they
Yeah, yeah,
are actually,
yeah.
and
Of
that's a
course. Yeah,
misconception. Even
yeah.
in a lot of clients and even in a lot of pen testers, what they do is they will take up OWASP and they will try to cover their pen testing through OWASP. I'm saying don't do that. I'm saying do your pen testing and then try to understand which category of OWASP is being covered in your assessment, and
So
then
just
correlate.
to, yeah,
Yes.
take it as a checklist after doing the initial work, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
got
So,
it.
for example, let's say, Love, there is a parameter that says that user, it's asking, it's asking for detail from me, and it is asking user role, and user role for me by default is going as user, and I change the value of user to admin, and I get an admin page. So basically, what I did was a privilege escalation, and the category would be broken access control of OWASP. So OWASP does not specifically tell you hundreds and thousand ways of conducting a broken access control attack. It will tell you there is a category. Anywhere you're able to bypass an access control or do an unauthorized activity or do a privilege escalation, you can categorize it in broken access control. So that mindset is very important, and
Got it. Actually, a
that
lot
is
of
just,
people will
that
get
is
help
again
from this
mindset. Yeah.
explanation itself. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Great.
that
Yes.
helps.
Got it.
And see, because that is
Yeah.
a holistic coverage. Now you're also sure that you have covered the OWASP top 10, and you're also sure that you are not entirely guided by it, because if you entirely get guided by it, you might miss out on some vulnerabilities that you might have been able to find out had you approached from a clear head, like not a biased approach is what I'm saying, like a fresh
Absolutely.
assessment, fresh out of the box, using your own tools and techniques basis on the application functionality,
Ah, right.
right? So one thing that is very important to understand, Love, is if you remember when we were doing the threat modeling session video, I
Yes.
spoke
Yes.
about that a lot of times people, because of pressure on deadlines and timelines, they directly begin with the application without having an application understanding. The
Right.
most important thing of doing an application security assessment is getting an application walkthrough. If it's a black box assessment, it's a different story where you are supposed to approach the application in a way that you have no knowledge. But if it's a gray box assessment where you are engaged with the client and you are provided credentials and a lot of other details, get an application walkthrough. If you have time, create a threat model. That will be the best assessment you would have ever done if you have created a threat model of the application, because in that case, see, there is a pertinent question after every assessment, Love. If you are my client and I'm doing an assessment for you, there will be a pertinent question where you will ask me, can you guarantee, Akshay, you have covered everything?
Yes, of course.
Obviously,
Yeah.
right? You're my
Yeah.
client, so you will obviously say that, what if my application gets hacked after you have given all your findings and I have fixed it?
Yeah. Right. Right.
So the essential question is the coverage. You're basically talking about the coverage. And obviously with experience, we with our assessments, with the kind of scope and the timelines we give, we cover everything. That's not to say that it doesn't, but if you have a threat model, then you can even assure yourself and the clients that this is the threat model, nothing out of this can be done to your application, and I have covered each and every attack.
It's
I
kind
have
of
covered
building the confidence in the client itself. I would say that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
assurance is the word, Love.
Yeah.
I will
Right.
give you an
Absolutely.
assurance, sir. This is the threat model. These are the use cases and abuse cases, and I have covered everything.
Yeah. Right. From n is equal to 0 to n is equal to 100. This is what it is. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And what the sweetest thing is, at the end of your assessment, you can attach the number of abuse cases and you can say whether you passed or you failed. So
Wow.
I'll tell you, the great thing about this is the client will get an assurance that, okay, I was not vulnerable to SQL injection. Akshay did pen testing and he could not find anything. So he will feel great about his own application, that
Right.
it was tried and it wasn't there. So not just saying that these are the mistakes in your application, also saying these are the good points of your application,
Right. Right.
right? So that kind of gives a great sense to whoever you're doing the assessment for, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Rather than following a checklist and just pointing out the
Exactly.
errors. Yeah.
Exactly.
Great.
And
Great.
and for that you need some time, you need some patience. But imagine the scope and the quality of such an assessment. If you get such
Absolutely.
a report, uh, I mean,
Yeah.
you will feel like, yes, okay, a good assessment has been done. You're feeling good about your strengths. You want to improve your weaknesses, and then you want to have like and once you've done it, if somebody is questioning you, you will say, no, the person has told me these cases and all of them have been covered. So that also gives an assurance. It's also a responsibility. Yeah.
Right. In this case, it seems like a complete SWOT analysis. You have tried to identify all the four quadrants rather than only pointing out at one quadrant. Right.
Yes,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Yeah.
You're not just saying that. See, and I'll tell you, Love, what happens. Be it an audit, be it an assessment, you're essentially finding out mistakes in an application.
Absolutely.
Understand from the owner or the developer's perspective. If you point out so many mistakes from a at a psychological level, it doesn't feel really good for somebody just pointing out mistakes, right? But
Right.
it's
Right.
our
Right.
job. We need to do it, and it's for a security purpose. But
Right.
if I tell you that, but your authentication mechanism, your session management was really strong, they will feel
Right.
good about it because they have done
Right.
something good. And it
Absolutely.
also gives your assurance from your side that I covered everything. So it's a good practice in general. That's why I promote everybody to do threat modeling and include that in the report. It's just that, with the time factors and practices change. It's just my opinion. Me and my team do it, and clients have always appreciated it. So yeah.
Absolutely, guys. This is the practical bit that Akshay is bringing out here. So make sure that you rewind this last 5 minutes and watch this video once again. Why I'm telling you, because this part no other YouTube video will cover. I'm
People
telling you right
people
away.
don't tell these. Yeah,
Yeah,
these are
and
trade
these
secrets.
are yeah, absolutely. I was about to say that these are business traits that he's giving out here. So make sure that you get this knowledge from him, and make sure that you get the most out of it, because this is how you actually add real value, right? Actually, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about XXE. Now let's focus on the next one, which is sorry. We talked about broken access control. Now let's focus on the next one, which is security misconfigurations. Now this in itself is a known thing. It doesn't have to be explained in a lot of details, because in a lot of our sessions we keep on covering security misconfigurations. And Love, by this time we all know about it. It's basically saying, when you're maintaining an application. See, basically, to understand this, a web application or an application for that matter, it's not just code. It's also different softwares, platforms, different components that you are using inside your application. So all of these together will comprise of your holistic, complicated web application architecture, right? So what we need to understand is that even if we are coding something, or even if my code in itself might be strong, the way in which I'm configuring my application has equal importance. To say that, are there any unprotected files and directories? Let's say I have created a great application, but my files and directories are directory listing. I was giving an example, and you can just directly view the files and get a sense of the application. So there could be a direct exploitation there, or I could get information that I can use to conduct further types of attacks, right? So that is one there. I have not done a complete patching. I have not I haven't made sure that I'm the vendor, the service, the sub service, micro service, or the component that I'm using is not the latest updated one, although it has been released by the vendor itself, right? I have unnecessary unused pages. So what happens, Love, is that when we are developing an application, we have a lot of pages, and then when what happens is we combine two pages and we put it in front, but there is an unused page that is already there, and I'm not looking at it. I'll give you a very small example of, I'm not going to name the client, but that happened in our case. Is they had a very, initially when they were doing it for testing purposes, they had a sample login page that had no login or password based checks as per their policy, because it was only done for test purposes when the application
Okay.
was in their internal network. Now, when they
Right.
migrated the application, basically what we call as a go live, when they went
Hmm.
live with the application, they forgot to remove that page.
Ah.
Now, that small login page was not easily discoverable directly, but through launching a spider or basically
Yes.
any automated directory traversal tool, we were able to find that login page, and brute forcing that page was a piece of cake. An
Yeah.
otherwise secure application gave entry into the modules just by this one page, and all they
Wow.
had to do was just disable or remove that page. But
Right.
not removing that page caused a direct access into the application, unauthorized
Right.
direct access. Right? So
Right. Right.
something that small could, kind of toss the whole thing around, and we
Yeah.
have already put in all the efforts of securing the whole application, but such a small misconfiguration could lead to
Right.
something like this, right?
Right. Right.
Also, this could mean like unnecessary services. I was using this FTP for uploading data, but then I forgot to remove the service, and now typically it should not be there, but it is open, so that could lead to an extra entry point into the application. So it's a similar fashion: ports, services, unpatched components, misconfiguration inside the web server itself, using unused pages, using allowing directories to be unprotected. So I'll give you a very another small example of this. Almost all of the applications, a lot of the applications allow data to be uploaded within the applications, right? It could be a profile picture, it could be some documents. Now, understand, let's say, Love, and I'm painting a scenario here, and bear with me. I'll try to go slow and stop me wherever I'm going too fast. Let's say I am a malicious person and I am trying to upload a malicious document. Right now, there is an entry point wherein there itself you can check. Now, basically, what's happening is okay. I'm sorry, I went far again. So let's take the concept of a document. Now it's allowing me to upload a PDF document, and then that document goes into a specific uploads directory, and that can be
Right.
accessed using that uploads xyz.com/upload/akshay.pdf. That is
Right.
available for download, and it can be viewed within the application separately, blah blah blah. That's okay.
It is there in the listing. Yeah.
It's there in the listing.
Right.
Now, my point over here is, first is that what I am now as an attacker trying to do is I am trying to upload a malicious file.
Okay.
Cool. Now, something that is not a PDF, I'll try to upload. Let's say I'm trying to upload a shell. Now, a PHP, it's a PHP application. I'm trying to upload a PHP shell. Now,
Right.
first thing is, from an application perspective, you're checking whether a PHP, you're putting all those checks, that is fine. But what if, let's say your checks are there or your checks aren't there? What if the uploads directory is set to have executable rights? Now, if your uploads directory is set to have executable rights, if I somehow manage to upload this file over there, I can directly access shell.php and get a shell of your application.
Right.
Now, let me give you a second scenario. What if even if the check wasn't there, and you are basically disabling, you are putting only read writes on that folder, which is uploads. Even if I upload a shell, the shell will not execute. So you will just get the shell downloaded again, but no harm happened on the directory.
Yeah, the launch will
So,
not be there. Right.
yes, so that extra configuration that you did, or that misconfiguration that you avoided,
Yeah.
even if the upload vulnerability was there, the exploit wasn't successful now.
Right. Absolutely. I got your point now, Akshay. Great. Great.
Yes, so that was
Yeah.
one of the things I was trying to
So the
mention.
mitigation strategy in this case would simply be to make sure that all the rights and everything that you rightly mentioned should be appropriate,
Yeah,
right?
uploads directory should not have an executable right. It only should have a read write.
Right. Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Also, Akshay, in the previous case of broken access control, the mitigation strategy would be to have an access control policy in place.
Yes, definitely. Access control policy should always be there.
Right.
One of the major things. Sorry, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that.
No worries. No worries.
Role-based access, basically, just
Absolutely.
to say that
R20.
different
Yeah.
types of people will have different types of roles, different types of accesses. So if you're an admin, you are only allowed these pages. If
Right.
you're a user, you're not allowed those pages. So yes, an access control policy within that application should be there. That can be defined in your web configuration file. Different directories with different user roles can be mapped very easily. It just needs
Great.
to be done.
Great. Great, Akshay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So after security misconfiguration, we have something of we have a celebrity vulnerability after
Yes.
SQL
A
injection,
lot
which
of
is
hype
your
on this one. Yeah.
yeah cross-site scripting. So okay, this will take a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Akshay. So, out of this, Akshay, just from my curiosity, before you actually delve into the biggest of them all, which is cross-site scripting, which is more easier to understand from a fresher's point of view out of all these 10, which are the easy takeaways from a fresher's point of view? Because they might be, overwhelmed by seeing 10 of them. So, which are the
Yeah,
easy
so I
things
so
to
I
get?
I tell you, Love, the most commonly asked ones. The
Yeah.
most commonly asked vulnerabilities from a web application perspective are cross-site scripting and SQL injection.
Ah,
Yes, because
okay.
they are the most prevalent ones. You will find them in the top cybersecurity threats as well. So if you want to go into cybersecurity, if you're starting with cybersecurity, if you just want to understand application security, XSS and SQLi are the two vulnerabilities that you have to understand. They are
Okay.
important because they are the most common ones, they are the most prevalent ones, they are the most exploited in number. When we're talking about statistics, the most
Hmm.
exploited vulnerabilities are XSS and SQL injection. That is
So
why we have two categories.
in interviews also they will be of course asking about these two only,
Most
right?
most
Yeah.
definitely 99.9%, if you're having an infosec interview, you will be asked about cross-site scripting. Especially in so in web security interview, Owasp top 10 is the most common question. If you're going for
Great.
a web security interview, you have to nail Owasp top 10 down. I mean, there's no other way to it. There is no other way to it. But if you're talking about a generic information security interview, even at a higher level, even at a security operations level, even at an incident response level, at a senior manager level, you will be asked about XSS and SQL injection. It's just the perspective changes. If you're a
Ah,
pen tester,
got
you
it.
will be asked about the exact technical details, how to conduct it. At a manager or at a protector or at a defense or at a blue team level, you will be asked about how the attack is done and what are the factors to basically monitor, detect, and respond to it.
Right,
So
right.
the perspective changes, but an operational knowledge and understanding of that attack is always there. And I would encourage people even in the blue team to know about at least these two.
Absolutely.
At
That's
least,
why I asked this, Akshay. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Great. Which makes the next bit critically important for all of you who are watching. Stay more focused now because here comes cross-site scripting. Go for it, Akshay.
Yes. Okay. So this one is a little bit of a celebrity amongst the web application vulnerabilities. This is called as cross-site scripting. We all have heard about it in some way or the other. If we are part of the InfoSec team, we have either read it in a report, we have either done some mitigation around it. We have probably faced this as a question in an interview, or we have just seen people talking about it a lot. So this is cross-site scripting. I will try to explain this in the most basic way possible, and I'm not going to get into a lot of details because again, I want people to understand the concept around it, so that when we do a next level of a session, you're not struggling with the basic concept or an understanding of a cross-site scripting. So understand that every application is taking a user input. Now, an application specifies which type of input it is taking. For example, that user input could be a form field where you are putting in your name or contact details or anything. Now, the application understands that this is either going to be a numeric, either going to be a string, it's going to be a combination of numeric and alphanumeric, letters, whatever. Basis on the business logic, basis on the application logic, it knows what input to expect. What basically it doesn't know is what not to expect. Right? So what essentially it's saying is that an untrusted input, when sent back from the server to a client and it gets executed inside the browser context, is basically a cross-site scripting. Now I'll explain this. Basically what I'm saying is, instead of giving a normal input, I'm injecting a JavaScript. So the main component of cross-site scripting is a JavaScript. So when I say scripting, it's basically a JavaScript, nothing else. So anything and everything around cross-site scripting is JavaScript. You can, okay, I'll talk about this later. So instead of sending a normal input, let's say it's asking for my name. Now let me take a very simple example now. That is to say that when I'm logging in, or when it's asking in an application, it's basically saying what is your name, and it has a text box, and I am essentially saying Akshay, and I'm hitting on enter. Now that input is going to the server. The server is basically saying, okay, I received a string called as Akshay. Now whatever string I receive, I will send that back in an HTML saying welcome user input. So when I put in Akshay, it will say, okay, take Akshay, attach it to welcome, put in the HTML tags, send it back to the person who sent it, and in his page, he will say welcome Akshay. I feel good. I have been welcomed in the application. Now when Luv gets this page, he will type in Luv Johar. It will go to the server. Server will say, okay, what is the user input? In this case, it's Luv Johar. Okay, fine. Welcome user input, which is Luv Johar. Put the HTML tags, send it back. HTML tags get on the browser. Browser parses it. It says, okay, HTML, welcome Luv Johar. Parses it. Luv Johar sees, welcome Luv Johar. He's happy about it. Right? Now, this is a normal communication. Now, what I am going to say is, basically, if you are able, instead of putting a normal input, if I send in a script, let's understand at a very basic level. I'm not even going to go into the specifics of it. Let's say I put in a script, a small script, and that goes in again. What is your name? My name is a small script, put in with the script tags and everything. So we need to understand, in JavaScript, basically in HTML, if you have to include a JavaScript, either you include a complete JS file, or basically using the script tag, the greater than sign, then script, then lesser than sign, then you put in the value of the JavaScript, and then you close the script tag. That is a script understood and acceptable by a browser as an HTML. So in an HTML page, if you have a script tag that contains a JavaScript, and you put it inside an HTML page, the browser will execute that script as it comes on that line, and it sees that script, it will execute it. Now that script could be a prompt, that script could be doing some variable, adding some value, making changes to some cookie, putting some checks or restrictions. I'm not going to get into the detail. You need to have a deeper understanding of how a web application works. It's actually very simple. If you want to learn about JavaScript, just Google JavaScript, structure of JavaScript. I think the W3 Schools is one of the de facto resources of learning more about HTML and web applications. So go ahead, do a little bit, and they have cool interfaces wherein the page itself you can put in scripts and see how the value is coming. So to learn more about it, you can go there. I'm not going to cover that in much detail. So coming back to my point, I sent a script tag and it goes to the server, and the server says, okay, this is fine. I don't mind. It must be his name. Maybe his name is a script, alert 123 script. People have different names. I don't mind it. And what it will do, it will say hello. It will put in the HTML tag and it will take the script, and then it will send back to the browser. And when the browser processes it, and as soon as it sees the script tag, it will say, okay, so there is a script that is coming in. Now let me execute whatever is written at the end of it. And it will alert 123 is basically an alert prompt, and it will give you a prompt which wasn't supposed to happen. It was only supposed to display the text that came back, and it actually executes that script. Now imagine if it is not checking and you've just put an alert, what are the other things that you can put? You can basically now manipulate all types of JavaScript based functionality at the client end. Anything and everything that JavaScript is enabling, you can do it.
Basically, again, you have got the open platform.
So, like in e-commerce applications, Luv, we know that add to cart is something that happens through JavaScript. That is not something that directly goes to the server. It only goes when you go for the checkout. So, you know, one thing could be adding a number of products that I didn't want. Now, one important thing to understand, Luv, is that this affects the client side. This is not, the exploitation does not happen at the server level.
Right.
This affects the client, either one or a lot of clients.
Right.
So this is important. That the execution of script happens at the browser level, the effect happens at the browser level, and it affects user.
Yeah.
And the worst consequence of an XSS is session hijacking, where you can actually steal the cookie.
Yeah, which you already discussed last video.
Because in the web architecture at client level, Luv, basically, let's say you have an active session.
Right.
Your session cookie is basically defined under a global or a standard variable which is called as a document.cookie. So within, there is a concept of a document object model or DOM. I don't want to, again, because this will become a web application development lecture, HTML lecture. I don't want it to become that. But within the DOM, I can basically, you can yourself access your cookie by saying document.cookie. So within your document object model, your session ID will be accessible by document.cookie variable.
Okay.
Now, if I can manipulate your JavaScript, Luv, I can create a script which takes your document.cookie and uploads it to my server.
Right.
Or sends it to me. Now it gets executed at your level. It will locally pick your document.cookie and remotely send it to me. I can then use that session ID to completely hijack your session without knowing your username or password.
So this is how attacks happen, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And this is why cross-site scripting is one of the feared and the celebrated, because doing it is easy. Doing it is easy. I am just sending inputs. I am just sending different types of scripts.
Right. Right.
But once I know it is vulnerable, that I can create a complicated script to actually do a lot of harm to an end user.
Absolutely.
And the added misfortune, Luv, is that either it will be a crafted page or it will be a crafted URL that I will share to different people. Now, whoever clicks on that page or clicks on that URL or accesses that page will get infected, because the application is vulnerable. Application is not validating anything.
Right.
So then I can mass send these links, and whoever has authenticated or is authenticated to application will get infected. And I can just sit back. I can just see my script, my page, my malicious link, my crafted URL doing its magic once I have fully understood and fully created that payload.
Wow.
The key is creating that payload. Once I have successfully created a payload, and what I'll do, Luv, I'll basically test it on myself, right? Because I'm an authenticated user. And once I have seen the result, then I'm golden. Then I just need to send it out to 100, 1,000, 10, one specific guy, whatever I want.
Right.
And I can just sit back and I can see people doing it.
This is really scary, man. I'm also trying to understand the implications here. It's actually massive destruction, actually.
Yes, and one of the earliest examples of excesses love was before Facebook and Orkut. There was MySpace, and
Yes,
and
MySpace.
yes,
Yeah.
and it used to have an excesses vulnerability where what a person did was basically JavaScript. When you're trying to add somebody as your friend, you're basically clicking on friend. There was a JavaScript that used to get activated, and through that person would get added to your friends list. Now this person tested it. This guy tested it for vulnerability, and he found that it's vulnerable to XSS, and he created a custom payload to add basically that script inside that tag would add him as a this thing as a friend, and on all the discussions that used to happen on the page, on the comment section he would just keep on posting that link, and anybody
Wow.
who clicked it would become his friend. Overnight he got 10,000, I guess, I don't remember the figure, but more than 10,000 people friended him without even knowing.
Wow.
So he got 10,000 friends in one night, in a couple of hours, just by exploiting that vulnerability. Now see, that's how simple it was, and uh,
Yeah.
obviously the impact here is just that, but then it's a misconfiguration, and I never wanted to friend this guy, but he's somehow
Yeah.
on my friends list.
Yeah, and guys,
So
the example that Akshay is taking is only an example. Okay, do not try to quote it in anywhere else. He's just trying to help you understand this concept, right, Akshay?
yeah, so that's the point. The idea is anything that can be done via a JavaScript,
Yeah.
and if the server is vulnerable to XSS, can then be done remotely by somebody else for on your behalf or on you. So that is the whole idea of an XSS.
What is
Now,
the
yeah.
mitigation strategy in that case, Akshay?
Before
Into
be-
validation?
before that, love, I would like to, because one of the most also like, and I know if I don't cover this, somebody is going to put this on the comment, is what are the different types of cross-site scripting, because
Go for it. Go for
that
it.
is also a question that is asked.
Actually,
So
one thing
basically,
before
yeah.
before you even do that, I can see a lot of questions coming now, and we have already reached 1 hour. So I
So
think
we'll stop. We'll
this
stop
will
at
actually
cross-site
have to
scripting.
be part three now. So
Yes.
this will be part three, and I am more than happy to go for it on a part three as well. And
Let's go for it, because the next one, insecure deserialization, also requires a
will
lot
take
of
time. Yeah, yeah, of
explaining.
course. And we want to
So
do justice here because we have been doing justice to these each of the Owasp vulnerabilities. So we will do complete justice with all of them. Great,
done, done.
Akshay. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. In fact, let's do one thing, love. The third kind of exercise, which is, so basically there are three kinds: reflected, stored, and DOM based. Let's cover DOM. Let's start with DOM based in the next session, because that is also going to take some time. That's the most confused type of exercise, and it wasn't there like from the start, and it got introduced somewhere in the middle, and people are confused, and a lot of people cannot explain DOM based exercise at all, especially in the interviews I take. Reflected and stored is something they can explain, but people always get stuck in DOM based exercise, so I
So
want to explain.
let's
Yeah,
even take one step back then, Akshay. Let's take all these types of exercises to after
okay,
this.
yeah,
Yeah, that will make more sense then. Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
sure, works.
Yeah.
So we can
Great.
have
Great.
it on the part 3. We can start
Yeah,
with
yeah,
exercise
absolutely. Let's
types,
start with
and
exercise types. Yeah, yeah. That
cool.
way, maybe audience engagement will
Then,
also be more,
yes,
and
and then
people
we
will spend more
continuity
time.
with the
Yeah,
thought process and everything. Yeah, that makes sense.
right, right, absolutely. So, guys, now we will be jumping onto the best part, as and always, and I can see a lot of tricky questions already on the board. So, feel free to ask any more tricky questions that you have, and Akshay is here to help us out. So, Akshay, before I jump onto the questions, great session, man. Of course, because kind of detailing that you did today, mind blowing.
Love, see, that is the point. And see, the thing about web vulnerabilities is they seem very understandable when somebody is trying to read a blog. It
Yeah.
just seems like I'm understanding it. But when I try to either put it into some practical experience, or when I try to explain it to somebody, somehow those things fail, because most of the times it's very specific. It's like specific. Even the tutorials, even the demonstrations, they focus on the actual attack. Somebody will show you a video of doing something, and it's very appealing, and I like it, and I'm very impressed by it. But can I explain it again to somebody else? No.
No.
So the basics and the foundation is something that it kind of gets missed in most of the, even the the explanation, the videos, and even in trainings. So Love, I would just like to say that a lot of people who have taken web application security trainings come for a job interview in my company and they fail my interviews because it's not focused on the foundation. The basics of it is not taught. The techniques are taught. So I will teach you 10 techniques, you will get impressed by me, the course gets over, you will give me the fees and it's done. But when they face somebody like me, or when they face somebody who has experience, when they are interviewed by that, and when they're given complicated scenarios, they're not able to perform. And then they feel bad, or they don't understand what went wrong. It's actually the foundation which needs to get stressed on. That's like my sincere request to everybody. Please. And people are in a rush. Let me just
Yeah,
quickly, I don't want to, I just want to start finding XSS. Just give me a link and I will put a script tag and I will get an output, and yes, I have done it. But that's not the key. Understand how it's happening, understand the anatomy of the attack, understand how further it could be exploited. That will build your knowledge and your skill and your capability. Just putting a script tag in each and every input and getting an output and just putting it in the report is fine.
yeah,
But did you actually learn anything out of it? No. And that
correct.
is the key. And that is how we teach in our trainings. That is what I expect from my consultants as well. That is how I have taught myself web application security.
Yeah, absolutely, Akshay. And just to add my 2 cents before I progress with the questions, as soon as you started the cross-site scripting, my traffic actually jumped up. The kind of views increased, the kind of engagement increased, the kind of audience increased. So maybe they were just waiting for cross-site scripting to come up.
Because it is, yeah, lovely. Because we already know SQL injection and cross-site scripting are celebrity vulnerabilities. I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
they
So by the time you were saying these lines that cross-site scripting is actually a celebrity, it kind of showed up in my metrics here. I saw a lot of people joining at that moment. So
Yeah,
yeah,
so I guess then we should expect a lot of people in our third part,
yeah,
because
absolutely.
across we will start with cross-site scripting, folks. So I guess, yeah.
Great. And now I'm curious whether to have a dedicated video and show these guys actually how this is done, man. Why
Yeah,
not? Because yeah,
so Love, once we are done with this whole series, like I said, no, we should have an advanced level wherein we can show these vulnerabilities like a little
yeah,
bit. We can just plan for it. Let's have a lab setup
absolutely.
done,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
let's just do it. I don't mind.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
mind really.
because then these discussions will make more sense when they will actually watch all this live in front of them happening. So just kind of imagine the kind of value that these guys will get. Absolutely,
Definitely.
bang on, Akshay. Great. So I'll quickly jump onto the questions now because people I think are watching me and they are just thinking why this guy is not going to the questions. So yeah, going for it, Akshay. So this is Yogesh Mahajan. First of all, thank you, Yogesh, for being there on the live stream. Actually, he's asking what are the possibilities of attacks if default applications are not removed from the web server?
Okay, so Yogesh, if default applications are left unchecked, then first of all, vulnerabilities that are there in your default applications could be exploited. Default credentials that are used to access these applications could be exploited. If the applications are using some specific vulnerable ports or services, then those services and ports could be exploited. Default pages, directories, and files of that application could be exposed. So within your application, they could use. A very small example would be, in your PHP, they used to have and I'm not remembering the PHP manager. By default, they used to have, and I'm not remembering the exact name, but they used to have a default PHP my admin. Yes, I remember. PHP my admin used to be like a default, and PHP my admin module was used to access and maintain your application, and it had a PHP editor as well module in it. And if left unchecked, somebody could go in the directory, access PHP my admin to remotely either modify the application or add some page into the application. It was long time back, but yes, that default application was not removed, that access was not removed, and that caused a lot of exploitations as well. So I hope that answers your question, Yogesh.
Great, Akshay. So after that, Yogesh, we have Om Prakash Yadav now. First of all, thank you, Om Prakash, for joining the live stream. Happy to see you here, brother. So Akshay, he's asking, I need to know how forensic analysis is being done. I know that it's a very long topic. In just a couple of lines, if you can just explain him some kind of a small, insight,
Yeah,
so that
so
he
Om
can take
Prakash,
note
I,
on
I
that.
think
Yeah,
we can
yeah,
have a session on forensics also.
absolutely. Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't
Just
mind.
a couple of lines for this. Yeah,
So, Om Prakash, you have to understand digital forensics and data forensics is basically the science or the activity of analyzing data that has been removed or that has been hidden or that has been deleted and is not directly accessible and viewable from the interface of your operating system. So you use different tools and techniques. So basically forensics is done for any kind of incident analysis or fraud investigation, and essentially what you're doing is the target system, you're creating a forensic image of that system, and basically you are ensuring the integrity of that image, and separately you are analyzing that image using different tools and techniques to kind of dive deeper into the data that is not at a surface level, going inside the memory and accessing and trying to retrieve data and doing analysis on that data, and basis on your investigation doing further analysis. So that is the key of any kind of a forensic investigation or forensic analysis for that matter.
great, great, Akshay. So as Akshay mentioned, Om Prakash, we'll have some sessions on forensic analysis also. But we do not want to introduce these topics upfront because a lot of freshers are also getting knowledge from these videos. So we actually want to gradually bring up this one, right, Akshay?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. Okay. After that, we have Shivkant Sharma. First of all, thank you, Shivkant, for watching the live stream. Guys, Shivkant is a great help to us. So, Shivkant, thank you for your help in managing the groups as well. So, Akshay, he's asking, is it computer forensics and reverse engineering are the same things?
No, Shivkant, they are not. Forensics, like I said, is the science of trying to uncover data from a target asset and trying to do further analysis on it based on keywords or based on patterns or based on regular expressions. Reverse engineering is basically the art of trying to determine the logic behind, and specifically on executables, because I understand, I think what you're trying to say is your traditional, the general definition. Basically reverse engineering is following the steps back to anything, but I'm not talking about that. I'm assuming you're talking about cyber security. So basically there is a code, the code was then run, compiled into a binary, and what you're basically trying to do is you're trying to trace back the steps from the executable in the binary, and you're trying to understand the logic that is there inside that binary to be able to either bypass its checks, controls, or try to come as close to the source code as possible. So a very basic example, quite a few years back, we used to have the concept of keygens, right? So basically you have the software and there will be a keygen along with it, if you're for anybody who might have seen it. So basically what it is doing is you can randomly generate different keys, and when you're trying to product register the product, you put in the key and it gets registered successfully without you having to purchase that license. So what happened over there, somebody took that binary, the checking logic of the serial is within the binary itself. The person reverse engineered that logic, came to know how the key is getting checked, through it developed an algorithm to generate the different types of keys, and then put it together in a keygen and released it. So that is the concept of reverse engineering. I hope that helps you.
Great, Akshay. Great. So that's it then, Akshay. I do not see any more questions now. And Om Prakash here is requesting us to have that session on the forensics. Of course, why not, Om Prakash? We will add this in one of the wish list here because the wish list is growing. Actually, I can say that from a lot of different requests that have come up.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
sure,
Oh my gosh, it's not. You don't have to say please, man. You know that
yeah,
we'll cover, because we have been covering topics, so you know that we'll cover anything and everything sooner or later.
yeah, sure, why not? So Akshay, anything you want to add before we conclude? Just great session, and feel free to add any inputs on whatever you all discussed. Just summarize it so that we can
Yeah. So
conclude it.
basically, we talked about the different types of vulnerabilities. We have been talking. about Owasp Top 10, we need to understand the importance of Owasp, the place of Owasp, how it should be used, what is the proper way of using Owasp as a guidance standard. We spoke about XXE, where we understood how XML is and what types of attacks could come in through. We understood access control and its important. We revisited the concept of misconfiguration in newly introduced in the context of a web application, and we touched base, or we kind of have started on cross-site scripting. We will continue this in the next session, so just watch out for it. Make sure you take the best from these videos, and any questions that you have, feel free to put it on the comments. I would really love to answer any type of question. I would encourage everybody to, if you're liking these videos, please subscribe and like Love's video. He puts in so much efforts, and not a lot of guys know that today he was facing electricity issues, and he still kind of made it at the last minute, and he was, the only thing in his mind was to have this live session. I had said that we can do it tomorrow, but he's so dedicated, guys. You need to see the level of dedication this guy has. I mean, I have not seen somebody with so much dedication just to make sure people who are there watching these videos get the kind of value they want. And then you don't want to miss out on these things just by subscribing and liking and sharing all these videos. If you're getting a lot of this, I don't see the problem on getting it done. So let's hope to get these videos to a larger audience. The more people there are, the more questions there are, the more motivated we will be to create more videos, even advanced and complicated videos and sessions for you guys. So you need to do that. Yeah, so
Sure.
that's pretty much it.
Thanks, Akshay. Akshay, one thing I would like to ask, since a lot of people, freshers, especially from the college, they want to go into the cybersecurity domain, but somehow they get this kind of an obstruction because there is no initial level from where they can start their journey. What would you like to tell them, for especially for these freshers? Do you have any kind of programs where these people can enroll themselves? What is it?
Yeah,
These
yeah,
questions
love. So
questions are being asked from me, so that's why I want to bring it up again. So
So
just a,
there we have programs, Love. Like I had said previously, also we have three levels basically in our trainings. We define three levels, which is like a beginner, a professional, and an expert. And we have combined as well as specific trainings. Like we have specific certified web application analyst, security analyst. We have certified vulnerability analyst and penetration tester, specific network based, web based incident response, forensics, reverse engineering courses for entry level people. We have combination of these courses as well. It's just what your interest is, what your aim is, what you want to learn. These courses have different structures, different timings, different formats. They are in combination, they are siloed courses as well. It just, so what they need to do is
get in touch.
yeah, they
Yeah,
just need to reach out, just drop
correct.
in a mail, and by far whoever has dropped in a mail, we have all communicated to each and every one of them. I have tried to
Right,
get in touch with as many people as possible. Obviously
right.
it's impossible for me to get in touch with everybody, but whoever is interested, after the first level of talking with my team, I make sure if somebody is interested or has a problem or has an issue or is in a matter of urgency or has some problem, I always try to get in a call with them. Even if they don't get go for the course, I at least make sure I can counsel them, guide them, give them some of my time, so that at least they have a clarity and they're not as confused as they were before talking to us. So that's the least
Absolutely.
we can do for these
Yeah.
people.
Absolutely, Akshay. Thank you for that. And guys, this is the link that Akshay is showing on his live feed. You can see that, and also in the description section of this video, there is a direct email address also, as well as a phone number where you can reach him. Akshay, before I end, I have a very long question from Ankush Chavan. So Ankush, I think, is the blogger who kind of helped us with this blog today as well in one of the WhatsApp groups. If you remember, he's
Yeah,
put
yeah,
in a
right.
great blog as well.
Yeah, and
So
Ankush had been following our videos. I think I
yes.
haven't seen Ankush for a while.
Yeah,
But
so
yeah,
he's kind
welcome
of
back,
returning.
Ankush.
Thank you, Ankush. Yeah. So Akshay is asking, when you go for any types of audit, can an auditor confirm anti-spoofing measures are being implemented? what do they need to check? Like, is it automatically enabled in the IDS or not? He wants to know.
So when you say anti-spoofing, Ankush, what exactly are you? I mean, what's spoofing? I mean,
Email
because
spoofing or what kind of spoofing?
yeah, if it's
Yeah.
IP spoofing or
Yeah. What are
I
you
mean,
trying to spoof?
and
Yeah.
against what asset are you talking about? This is a very
Right.
generic question and is not bang on. I mean, on the see, you have to define two things. First, what is the target system against which spoofing, and what type of spoofing attack are you talking about? Because spoofing in itself can be asset target specific and
Yeah.
activity specific.
Right. Right. Right.
So
Absolutely.
maybe
Yeah.
you can give me more
Yeah,
details.
Yogesh got his value, Akshay. He's saying nicely explained, and he got his questions answered. I am getting a lot of appreciations, Akshay. So yeah, great session. I can clearly say that. And thank you so much for watching, guys. It was a great help, and I'm sure a lot of you would have got a lot of great value from this session itself. Akshay, thank you for your time. I know that it was very late today, and you are also not completely well. I can clearly see that. But despite that, hats off to the dedication that you are also giving here. So yeah, great. Especially during this pandemic situation. I think Ankush Chavan has returned back, Akshay, before I conclude. So he's saying blocking traffic originating from the internet.
Blocking traffic originating from internet with internal address. Okay, I got it. So yeah, Ankush, you can basically configure this on the IPS. You can configure this on the firewall. So basically, anything that is sitting on the network. So you have to break down your point. You have to check whether the traffic that is getting from originating from the internet is passing through either your firewall, or will be passing through your firewall with IPS IDS capabilities, or a separate IDS IPS. So that is where you check that the traffic is ingress or outgress, and egress or ingress, and basis on if the traffic is coming from outside to inside, it should not have an internal IP address. It's a very basic parameter that can be configured inside a firewall or an IPS. So yeah,
Right. Right.
that rule, when auditor is going for it, he needs to check for that firewall rule or that configuration inside that firewall manager or inside that IPS manager, to check whether anti-spoofing has been enabled or not. So either it is a check or it is a rule. If you're a technical auditor, you might go for a rule, or you might bring along a firewall guy who can validate whether this is correct or not. So
Great.
that will give you an audit check. So I hope
Great,
that.
Akshay. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, that's it then, Akshay, because I think it's a lot of late nights here. So
Yeah.
people would have to sleep as well. I still see around 10 people on the live stream. So thank you so much for tuning in, guys, and stay safe because this is pandemic situation. Akshay, thank you for your time. Take care.
Thanks. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.